Red Bluff was the kind of western town where the wind seemed to carry gossip faster than horses carried mail. A single rumor could sweep across Main Street before the dust even settled from passing wagons. That was the world Clara Whitfield lived in, an honest world in some ways, but also a dangerously eager one. Ready to pin blame wherever it pleased, Clara had arrived in Red Bluff less than a year ago, hoping to build a small life for herself as the town's first proper school teacher. She had dreamed of chalkboards, sturdy benches for children, and someday maybe enough books to make a real library. She imagined teaching reading to ranchers' sons, arithmetic to their daughters, and offering every child a chance to rise above the hardships of frontier living. But the West didn't always reward dreamers. The trouble began on a blazing afternoon, when rancher Samuel Hargreaves, a wealthy man with a temper as sharp as barbed wire, was found, robbed and wounded on the edge of his property. He survived, but the moment he could speak, he pointed a trembling finger and slurred out two words: "The school teacher." No one stopped to ask why. No one questioned how a gentle woman like Clara could steal from a hardened rancher or overpower him. In a place where law was still learning to stand on its own feet, suspicion fell on the most convenient target. Clara had once corrected Hargreaves' daughter's math homework and embarrassed the girl. This, apparently, was enough motive for half the town. Clara tried to defend herself. She spoke to the sheriff, her voice steady but tight. "Sheriff, I didn't go near his ranch. I spent the day teaching, same as always." But the sheriff, pressured by loud voices and louder anger, shook his head. "Clara, folks are convinced. They want answers. And they want someone in cuffs." The news spread like prairie fire, and just like that, Clara went from respected teacher to hunted fugitive. By nightfall, a posse had formed: ranch hands, drifters, and a few men who simply enjoyed the thrill of chasing someone weaker than themselves. They fanned out on horseback, torches in hand, rifles across their saddles. Red Bluff, in its hunger for justice, had turned into something else entirely: a judge, jury, and executioner rolling across the plains. Clara's heart pounded as she packed her few belongings: a worn leather satchel, her grandmother's shawl, a canteen she filled at the pump, and a bundle of papers she couldn't bear to leave behind. She saddled her mare at Dusty, whispering apologies into the gelding's mane. "I know you're tired," she murmured, "but we have to go." Dusty seemed to understand, snorting softly as if urging her to hurry. Clara didn't look back as she rode out of town. The moon cast a pale shimmer over the open plains, turning the sparse desert shrubs into long, twisting shadows. To the east lay rugged canyons and Apache territory, a place most townsfolk feared but that offered the cover Clara desperately needed. As she rode, panic clawed at her throat. Would they shoot her on sight? Would anyone believe her innocence? Did the truth even matter anymore in a place where reputation meant everything? But along with fear came a stubborn spark inside her, a belief she had always carried as a teacher, that the truth mattered, and that running didn't make her guilty. It only gave her the chance to live long enough to clear her name. The first night she rode until her legs ached and her eyes stung with exhaustion. She rested only when Dusty nearly stumbled from weariness. Clara slid off the saddle, sinking to her knees beneath the open sky. She whispered prayers to the stars, grateful for at least the cold water in her canteen and the faint breeze brushing her face. She knew she couldn't outrun them forever. She knew survival in the frontier required more than bravery. It required knowledge of land, of weather, of people, and she had little of it. The desert stretched endlessly around her, both refuge and threat. What Clara didn't know, what she couldn't have imagined, was that she was already being watched. Someone else moved through the land with silent certainty. Someone who saw her tracks, saw her exhaustion, and understood her situation better than any sheriff ever could. before long, her fate would be intertwined with the last person she expected, Dakota, the fiercest Apache warrior for miles. But for now, Clara was simply a woman accused, alone on the run, riding into a land that would change her life forever. Clara woke before sunrise, though she felt as if she hadn't slept at all. The desert chilled her bones at night and scorched her skin by day, a reminder that the frontier didn't care who was innocent or guilty. The West belonged to those who understood it, and she did not. Dusty nickered nervously, shifting his weight as if sensing danger nearby. Clara stroked his neck, trying to soothe both of them. "It's all right, boy," she whispered. "We just need to keep moving." But even she didn't believe her own words. They weren't alone. For the past hour, Clara had felt something, an instinctive prickle at the back of her neck, as though unseen eyes were watching her from somewhere beyond the low mesa ridges. She had grown up in a town, not on the open frontier, but even she knew when silence felt too heavy there were no birdsong, no rustling from jackrabbits, no distant call of coyotes. Just stillness. Dusty flicked his ears and stamped his front hoof. Clara swallowed hard. She mounted her horse and nudged him forward, trying to look calm. The sun crept upward, staining the sky a deep orange. Shadows stretched long across the land. It was in one of those shadows just beneath the rocky overhang that she first saw him. At first, she thought he was just part of the landscape, a tall, dark shape unmoving against the stone. But then his silhouette shifted and her breath caught in her throat. A man stepped into the early light. His presence was quiet, but somehow powerful, like the desert itself had shaped him. He wore traditional buckskin, decorated with beads and quills that glowed faintly in the morning sun. His hair was long, braided at the sides, and his face bore paint marking travel and readiness. To Clara, he looked both fierce and calm, like someone who belonged to this land in a way she never could. Her pulse drummed in her ears. An Apache, one of the very people Red Bluff claimed to fear. Clara's first instinct was to flee, to kick Dusty's flanks and race away. But she knew that would be useless. The man carried no rifle. He didn't need one. A warrior raised on the land could track a frightened schoolteacher for days without breaking a sweat. She forced herself to breathe. The man took one slow step forward, then another. He did not raise a weapon. He did not call out. Instead, he studied her with steady eyes that reminded her of storms, powerful, patient, and impossible to look away from. Finally, he spoke, his voice deep yet quiet, shaped by an accent she'd rarely heard so closely. "You ride poorly for someone who travels alone." Clara's heart lurched. I'm just passing through," she stammered. "You are being hunted." He stated it plainly, not as a question, but as fact. Her breath shivered. "Who told you that?" The warrior tapped the ground lightly with his finger. "The land tells its own stories." He pointed toward the faint, dusty trail behind her. 3 riders. Maybe more. They follow you without rest." Clara's chest tightened. So the posse was close, far closer than she thought. She tried to speak bravely. "They think I did something I didn't do." The Apache looked at her for a long moment. "I know. You know?" He nodded once. "A guilty person leaves a different trail. Yours is fear, exhaustion. Hope that runs thin." He paused. "Not guilt." The weight of his words stunned her. This stranger saw more truth in her than her own townsfolk had. "My name is Clara," she whispered. Unsure why she felt compelled to trust him. The warrior straightened, placing a hand over his chest in greeting. "I am Dakota." Clara felt the name settle into her memory with unexpected warmth. Dakota surveyed the horizon again. "You will not survive if you keep riding without direction. The sun will break you long before your hunters do." Clara looked around. The plains stretched endlessly beautiful but merciless. I don't know these lands. I don't know where to go. Dakota's expression softened just slightly. Then you need someone who does. He pointed toward a narrow canyon hidden between two ridges. I will take you to water and shelter. But you must follow quietly. Clara hesitated. The stories she'd been told her whole life screamed warnings. Don't trust Apache. Don't ride with them. Don't even speak to them. But those stories had also told her she would be safe in Red Bluff, and look how that turned out. She met Dakota's eyes, seeing no malice there, only certainty. All right, she said softly. I'll follow. A single nod from him sealed the decision. Clara had no way of knowing then, but this moment, this choice would change the course of both their lives. The fiercest warrior she had ever heard of had just stepped out of legend and into her path, and instead of capturing her, he would become her only hope. The narrow canyon offered shelter from the scorching sun, but it was far from a sanctuary. Dust coated Clara's clothes, and every step reminded her that the West demanded more than courage, it demanded knowledge she did not yet possess. Dakota moved ahead of her, Dusty obediently following, his presence calm and confident. Every motion he made seemed deliberate, almost ritualistic. Clara noticed how he scanned the terrain, listening to sounds too faint for her to detect, reading the desert like a book written in sand and stone. It was as if he could see the world in layers she had never imagined. You must learn to read the land, Dakota said without looking back. The desert tells you where water hides, where predators lie, where the wind carries danger. Clara nodded, trying to focus. Her life until now had been devoted to books, lessons and chalkboards, but suddenly she realized that knowledge could take a more immediate, vital form, knowledge of survival. They rode on, Dakota occasionally pointing out subtle signs, the flattened grass where a rabbit had burrowed, the faint odor of water beneath cracked earth, a bird hovering in a way that suggested it had spotted prey. Clara listened, absorbing each detail. It's all connected, Dakota said. Every living thing, every shadow, every gust of wind. You cannot survive by ignoring the land. Clara had always thought of herself as clever, but the desert humbled her. Every misstep could cost her life. And yet, with Dakota beside her, she began to feel a strange sense of empowerment. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with brilliant oranges and reds, they made camp near a hidden spring. Dakota gathered firewood while Clara carefully cleaned, Dusty, and arranged the few supplies she had salvaged. Sitting by the fire, she felt a flicker of fear mixed with awe. Dakota's presence was commanding, yet quiet. He did not rush her, did not force her to speak, but he watched her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. You survived the posse this far, he said, handing her a small piece of dried meat. Many would have given up hours ago. That is courage. Clara smiled faintly. I don't feel courageous. I feel tired and afraid. But I have to keep going. I can't let them win. Dakota studied her, and for the first time, he spoke more personally. You have spirit. That spirit is rare. It can be your greatest strength if you learn to control it. She looked at him, realizing that he was not merely a protector, he was a teacher, guiding her in ways she had never expected. And in this strange desert land, she needed guidance more than she had ever needed in a classroom. As night fell, they shared stories by the firelight. Clara spoke of her childhood, of her dream to educate children and change lives. She told him of her students' curiosity, their small victories with reading and writing, and the satisfaction of helping them learn something new. Dakota listened in silence, nodding occasionally. Then he shared stories of his own people, lessons of respect for the land, traditions passed through generations, the importance of community and observation. Clara realized she had much to learn, not only to survive physically, but also to understand the values and wisdom that had sustained his people long before. Towns like Red Bluff existed. There was a quiet intimacy to this exchange. Clara, who had spent her life among walls and chalkboards, felt connected to the vastness of the desert and the depth of another culture. She realized that survival was not merely about hiding or running, it was about understanding, adapting, and learning from those who knew the world better than she did. Hours passed. The fire dwindled. Clara lay beneath the open sky, staring at stars that seemed impossibly bright and numerous. She felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. Hope that she might survive the pursuit. Hope that truth would be recognized, and hope that the West could be more than a place of danger, it could be a place of learning, courage, and unexpected alliances. Dakota, sitting quietly beside her, did not speak. But his presence reminded her of one crucial truth. In this harsh world, trust was difficult, but sometimes necessary. Sometimes, the fiercest protector could also be the wisest teacher. Clara drifted to sleep that night, guided by Dakota's steady presence, Dusty at her side, and the vast desert stretching endlessly around them. For the first time, she realized that survival depended not only on speed or cunning, but on listening, observing, and learning from the land and from people who knew it better than she ever could. And somewhere deep in her heart, she knew that this journey, dangerous as it was, might change her life forever. The desert, which had been Clara's refuge, began to feel like a trap. Dusty's ears twitched at every sound, the faint rustle of brush, the snap of a twig, the distant clatter of hooves. Clara's stomach churned. She had hoped that moving deeper into Apache territory would put miles between her and the posse. But Dakota's face had grown serious that morning. "They are close," he said quietly, scanning the horizon. "They will not give up easily. They follow your tracks, and they know the land better than you might think." Clara swallowed hard. She had imagined being caught, but reality was far worse. The posse was not a single person. They were a wave, a swarm of anger and false certainty. Red Bluff's townsfolk had transformed into hunters, convinced of her guilt. She had never felt so small, so exposed. Dakota, however, remained calm. His confidence radiated quietly, like the sun rising over the canyon rim. He did not brandish a weapon but studied the land, reading it as if it were a map written just for him. "Your fear makes your trail obvious," he said. "Breathe. Move with care. Follow me." They veered into a narrow canyon that opened into a hidden alcove, invisible from the ridges above. Clara realized how little she understood about the land she had thought she knew. Dakota's knowledge wasn't just skill, it was survival. He had mastered every shadow, every bend in the trail, every echo that could betray a traveler. As they moved, Dakota spoke of more than just survival. "People often believe that fleeing alone is safer," he said. "But the land can teach you that trust, wisely given, is a strength. Those who chase you will not understand that." Clara nodded, absorbing the lesson. She had fled without allies, assuming that isolation was safety. She had learned in the desert's quiet and harshness that sometimes strength came from choosing who to trust, and that choosing wisely could mean the difference between life and death. Hours passed, and the posse grew closer. Dusty's hooves stirred clouds of dust as they navigated a labyrinth of canyons and washes. The air shimmered with heat, tension, and fear. Every time Clara heard a shout in the distance, her heart nearly stopped. She thought she could hear them, men calling for her name, accusing her, demanding justice before even asking questions. Dakota placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "They are predictable," he said. "They follow the path they know, but they do not understand the land. Watch and learn. Under his guidance, Clara noticed the small details: broken branches indicating a shortcut, faint tracks of a rabbit showing the safest path around a cliff, a dry wash that concealed their passage from any pursuers. Slowly, her panic eased as she realized she could read the land too if she paid attention. By late afternoon, they reached a concealed outpost, a dilapidated cavalry station abandoned long ago. Its walls were crumbling, but it provided cover and a vantage point. Dakota motioned her inside and set up a small watch. Clara crouched, heart hammering, as they listened. The posse's voices echoed faintly down the canyon. They were searching, cursing, confident in their righteousness. Clara realized how fragile the line between justice and assumption could be. How quickly fear and rumor could turn a town against one of its own. "They believe in the wrong story," she whispered. "Yes," Dakota replied. "And that is why the truth must be revealed, not just for you, but for them. Running only delays the lesson." Clara looked at him. She had always thought of justice as something abstract, something delivered by lawmen or courts, but she began to understand it as action, observing, proving, and standing firm in truth. And right now, Dakota was her teacher, showing her not just how to survive, but how to prepare for the confrontation that would clear her name. As night fell, the wind carrying the posse's distant shouts, Clara felt a quiet determination settling in her chest. Fear still pulsed through her veins, but so did resolve. She would not let injustice triumph, not this time. Dakota studied her, the flickering firelight reflecting in his eyes. "Tomorrow, we find the one who truly robbed the rancher. Only then will your name be free." For the first time since she fled Red Bluff, Clara allowed herself to hope. With Dakota's guidance, she understood that escaping was not enough. Survival required courage, knowledge, and wisdom. And soon, the truth would be revealed, not just to save her, but to teach those who had judged too quickly. That assumption could be as dangerous as any outlaw. She closed her eyes beneath the stars, listening to Dusty's soft breathing and Dakota's calm presence nearby. The West was harsh, wild, and unforgiving, but it also had lessons to teach those willing to learn, and Clara was ready to learn them. The first light of dawn filtered through the canyon walls, painting the rocks in soft amber. Clara stirred, brushing the dust from her clothes, and glanced at Dakota. His silhouette was calm, almost meditative, as he scanned the distant horizon. Despite the perilous situation, there was an unspoken confidence about him, a certainty Clara wished she could borrow. "Today," Dakota said quietly, "we find the man who robbed the rancher. Only then will your name be free." Clara nodded, gripping Dusty's reins. Fear still lingered, but now it was tempered by resolve. She realized she was no longer running blindly. Under Dakota's guidance, she had learned to read the land, to track the faintest traces, to notice details that most would overlook. Every stone, every tuft of grass, every subtle imprint in the sand told a story. They followed the trail, which led toward the river valley beyond the ridge, a place where Dakota knew water was plentiful and concealment easy. The drifter who had robbed the rancher had underestimated both Clara's determination and Dakota's skill. As they approached, Dakota whispered, "See the broken branches? He passed here yesterday. He moves fast but leaves careless traces." Clara squinted, recognizing the slight disturbances in the earth. She felt a rush of empowerment. For the first time in days, she was not merely a victim. She was an active participant in reclaiming her life. Hours passed as they moved carefully, avoiding obvious paths that the posse might have used to follow her. Dakota taught her how to read subtle signs, the direction of a bird's flight, the weight of footprints in soft sand, the way the wind shifted scent. Clara marveled at how much she had learned in just a few days. The West, once terrifying and unknowable, was starting to make sense. By late afternoon, they spotted him, a man crouched near the riverbank, trying to wash the dust from his clothes and hide the stolen items. He looked up, startled, and then reached for a hidden knife. "Stay behind me," Dakota said calmly. Clara's pulse raced, but she obeyed. She watched wide-eyed as Dakota approached the drifter. There was no shout, no sudden attack. The warrior's presence alone commanded attention and authority. "You are the one who robbed Samuel Hargreaves," Dakota said, his voice steady and unyielding. "Your deeds are done. Come with us." The man's bravado faltered. He tried to run, but Dakota's knowledge of the terrain left him nowhere to hide. Within moments, the drifter was restrained, holding the stolen goods in his hands. Clara stepped forward, her voice shaking but clear. I am Clara Whitfield," she said. "I did not do this. He is the one." The man's protestations fell flat. Dakota's presence and Clara's composure left no room for argument. Together, they led the drifter back toward Red Bluff. Every step brought Clara closer to justice, closer to clearing the name that had been smeared so carelessly. When they arrived, the townsfolk had gathered, muttering and uneasy. They had expected Clara to return in shame or submission, but instead, she walked with the Apache warrior who had guided her. Her head held high. Tako handed the drifter over to the sheriff, who looked both surprised and embarrassed. He had been ready to arrest Clara without proof, but now the truth stood before him. Clara took a deep breath. "I did not rob Mr. Hargreaves," she said firmly. "This man did, and I have Dakota here to confirm it." The sheriff nodded reluctantly, understanding the lesson he had ignored. Assumptions, bias, and rumors were dangerous, especially when they overshadowed evidence and careful observation. The townsfolk murmured, some ashamed, some impressed. Clara's reputation was restored, not just because she was innocent, but because she had demonstrated courage, intelligence, and the ability to learn from a mentor who understood more than anyone in Red Bluff. Dakota stayed quietly at her side, neither seeking praise nor recognition. His role was simple: to ensure justice was done. And in doing so, he had not only protected Clara but had shown her and the town the importance of careful observation, trust, and respect for knowledge that might not come from conventional sources. Clara smiled faintly at Dakota. "Thank you," she said softly. He nodded, his calm expression unchanging, yet she could see approval in his eyes. "Your courage brought truth to light. That is enough." For the first time in days, Clara felt relief wash over her. She was no longer hunted. She was no longer afraid. And with the truth revealed, she could finally look toward a future of her choosing, a future shaped not by fear or rumor, but by courage, learning, and understanding. The West was still wild, still unforgiving. But now Clara had not only survived it, had taught. Her lessons she would carry forever. The dust had settled over Red Bluff, and for the first time in weeks, Clara could walk through the streets without fear. Children waved at her as she passed, curious eyes peering from behind fences and shop doors. The townsfolk whispered, but this time their words were not of accusation. They were of respect. Clara Whitfield had survived, and she had proved the truth. Yet Clara knew her journey was far from over. She could return to the quiet life of a schoolteacher, or she could take the lessons she had learned on the run and turn them into something larger, something lasting. She chose the latter. Clara stood before a small, abandoned building at the edge of town. Its walls were cracked, its windows dusty, but the roof was intact. With determination in her eyes, she set to work, clearing rubble, fixing boards, and gathering what furniture she could salvage. Soon, the building became a schoolhouse, a place where children from both Red Bluff and neighboring Apache families could learn together. It was not an easy task. Some townspeople were skeptical, whispering that mixing children from different cultures would cause trouble. Others simply doubted that Clara could make a difference. But she pressed on, remembering Takota's lessons: observation, patience, and the belief that understanding could overcome fear. Takota remained by her side, offering guidance and protection when needed, but also letting Clara lead. He helped her understand the desert's challenges, showing how the land could be used to teach not only survival but also science, geography, and the interconnectedness of all living things. The schoolhouse slowly came to life. Children of all backgrounds arrived each morning, eager to learn. Clara taught reading, writing, and arithmetic, but also lessons drawn from the desert and the plains: how to track animals, identify plants, and respect the land that sustained them. The children listened in wonder, realizing that learning could be both practical and inspiring. Through it all, Clara and Takota grew closer. Their bond, forged in the heat of the desert and the shadow of danger, deepened with every shared moment of triumph and challenge. Takota admired Clara's courage, her intelligence, and her unwavering commitment to teaching. Clara admired Takota's strength, his wisdom, and the quiet kindness that lay beneath his fierce exterior. One evening, as the sun set and painted the canyon walls in gold and crimson, Takota walked her to the edge of the schoolyard. Dusty grazed nearby, and the children's laughter echoed faintly in the distance. "You have built something remarkable," Takota said softly. "Not just a school, but a bridge between worlds." Clara smiled, feeling warmth spread through her chest. "I couldn't have done it without your guidance. You saved my life, taught me how to survive, and helped me see what truly matters." Takota stepped closer. "And you taught me something too: courage, hope, and the power of knowledge. Together, we make each other stronger." In that quiet moment, Clara realized that her journey had brought her not only survival and justice, but also partnership, understanding, and love. The desert, once harsh and unforgiving, had shaped them both, guiding them to this new beginning. Over the following months, the schoolhouse flourished. Clara's students thrived, learning to respect one another and the land they called home. Takota helped where he could, sharing lessons from his heritage and teaching the children practical skills that would serve them in the rugged West. Clara and Takota's relationship grew alongside the school. They rode together across the plains, guided travelers, and helped townsfolk understand the importance of fairness and observation. Slowly, Red Bluff transformed from a place of suspicion and fear into a community bound by trust and learning. One quiet evening, as the stars blinked overhead, Clara reflected on her journey. She had been accused, hunted, and alone, but she had survived, learned, and grown. The fiercest warrior she had ever known had become her protector, her teacher, and her partner. And in doing so, he had helped her turn a life of fear into one of hope, education, and purpose. Clara knew that the West would always be wild, unpredictable, and sometimes dangerous. But now, she faced it not as a victim, but as a woman armed with knowledge, courage, and love. She had found not only survival but happiness. The desert wind rustled through the canyon, carrying a quiet promise that even in the harshest lands, justice could be restored, trust could be built, and a new life could bloom strong, resilient, and full of possibility. And so, with Takota by her side, Clara Whitfield began the next chapter of her life, not running from the West, but shaping it, teaching its children, and living fully in the land she had once feared. The West had tested her, and in the end, it had given her everything she had ever needed.